Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Great Reassessment Podcast. I'm your host, Matthew Mastronardi, and I am really excited to welcome today's guest, Matt Lindland. It's nice to meet you.
Thank you, Matthew. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I've been reading a ton about you online over the last couple of weeks, since we first engaged on X,
Yes.
and that's been really fun because you've done a lot. Like even this morning, my wife and I, we were reading your Wikipedia page,
Okay.
and we were
Don't know
both
how much of that's true, but
amazed. Well, you can tell me, like, have you read your Wikipedia page at all?
I probably not in a long time, but I'm sure
Okay.
there's some truth in there, like everything in our culture these days. There is truth. You got to dig a little deeper to get the real truth, and we'll get an opportunity to do that on this talk today.
Absolutely. So for those of you who don't know, Matt Lindland is a former Olympic wrestler. He was a professional MMA fighter, and you even had a small stick in politics for a little while. Is that right?
Well, I ran for an office in '08 in a very liberal state, and we had a little organization called Acorn that was going around and flipping districts and changing the demographics of. I lived in a rural area, and I thought it was plausible
Mhm.
to potentially win that. Um, Part of Portland is in Multnomah County. Part of my district had Multnomah County in it, and then super liberal. I refer to it as kind of a trustafarian county, which is up in Hood River. It used to be a very rural area, and a lot of hipsters started moving in and kind of changing the demographics of that area. And then Clackamas County, which is my home county, really started
Mhm.
changing over probably more in the last 4 to 8 years. Not so much in '08, but Acorn. And we saw that with James O'Keefe when he went out and showed that they were actually flipping districts, changing voter profiles. So it looked like there was an opportunity to win in that district. We did not have somebody running at that time. I was getting ready for a fight. I was lifting with my strength coach, and he said, "Hey, I need you to go home and file. No, Patty's not running again, and we need somebody in this office. So go in and file." I filed,
Mhm.
and the chaos kind of started. It was like, "Who are you?" The GOP's calling me.
Wow.
I'm like, "I'm your new candidate. That's who I am. I've just switched from Libertarian to the Republican Party, and I'm going to run for this seat." And they said they were going to they
Wow.
had a candidate, and I said, "Well, it's 10 o'clock on filing day, and your candidate hasn't filed yet. So allow me the time to vet your candidate. Maybe I'll just get behind her and support her." But when I did a little research, the candidate had never actually had a job outside of government. Her main priority was putting more kids in government schools at earlier ages. So she worked for an organization called Head Start, which is basically early indoctrination of children, just getting them out of the family, getting them into government schools on an earlier basis, and they usually do that in a lot more poor communities. And so that was her big thing. And then the life issue was probably the biggest issue for me. She was definitely pro-abortion, and this is a Republican
Mm.
in Oregon. This is somebody that the GOP was running. Um, and so those two issues alone, I was basically like forced my hand to run. So I won the primary and lost by a 2 point margin in the general.
Oh man. Wow. Well, yeah, you made a point. Like a lot of these government officials have never had jobs outside of politics, but you certainly have. And on top of your MMA and wrestling career, you're a coach now, and so I want to just explore that a little bit.
Yeah, I became
Um,
a coach
so
pretty
what?
early in life. While I was in college, my wife and I had our first child, my son, going into my junior year of college. And so, I,
Mhm.
I kind of coached him up and starting out early, and then while I was an athlete, I was teaching kids in the wrestling club at the University of Nebraska, and that just kind of became a passion to see kids really learn and grow and develop who they can possibly become potentially. And that's really right now is
Yeah.
my main focus. I spent the last 2020 like kind of changed everything. Really opened my eyes up to I mean I've spent a lot of time, reading the Bible and studying scripture, but never really experienced demonic attacks, thank God. I mean those are something that I don't want to really like delve into. I just it's a little spooky, and even though the Lord tells us not to fear and He's with us, it's still a little spooky. And when that all came out in 2000, it was so obvious that there was just evil spirits and demonic attacks going on, and I just chose not to deal with that. But that was kind of the beginning of me wanting to leave the. I was coaching the United States Olympic team for the Rio Games and the Tokyo Games at the highest level. I was leading the national team for USA Wrestling, and when that started happening, I just started seeing more and more stuff. And then we all kind of saw it in the Paris Games, where they blasphemed our Lord, and
Mm.
just I mean, there was a lot of demonic stuff going on at those Olympics.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about that. You started wrestling at 15, is that right?
Yeah, and apparently that's a late age in this sport. It's
I was just blown away because like I wrestled from the time I was 10 through graduating high school,
okay.
and how how hard it is to be an average wrestler. People have no idea. And so how did you accomplish so much starting at such a a late age, I guess, because 15, what were you, a freshman in high school?
Yeah, freshman in high school. And to be
And
honest, I had 12 weeks of wrestling before that in my junior high, and it was more like a fun thing, get together with kids in your school that wanted to go out for the wrestling team. It was like a 6 week program. You trained a little bit, you got some competition, you got a taste of it, and they were like, okay, it's over. And I just kind of went back to. I didn't really know that this was a a sport that you could pursue like that. And I really didn't. I didn't really have a passion for it. It was just something that I did in junior high for, like I said, 6 weeks, seventh grade, 6 weeks in the eighth grade. So I had a little taste of it, but it wasn't something I'd really considered doing. And then I was pretty involved with another sport at that time. I was a equestrian athlete and pursuing hunter jumper, and I had goals of representing the United States in the Olympic Games. And my mother told me that we were not rich enough for me to be a horse rider and an equestrian athlete. So it would probably I'd want to look for another sport to participate in.
yeah. So talk to me about the Olympics a little bit. Like, what is it like trying to qualify? I mean, was that your full-time job is training to be an Olympic athlete? And then, I'm imagining like post college, like what is that time of your life like? And um, I also know you have an interesting story about how you qualified for the Olympic team, how you got your name, the law, and then like take us through what is it like to actually like walk into the stadium, during the opening ceremony and having worked so hard to get there.
Well, I mean, it's a bit of a like, okay, I made it. I'm here. This is what I've been planning for. Um, I mean, for me, it was a job. It was something that I was doing. The opening ceremonies were just part of that process. I definitely wanted to experience and be a part of that because I felt like that would help prepare me for competition. But I wasn't really there to take in the Olympic experience so much as I was there to compete.
What was it like personally and, just as an athlete?
Well, it was pretty fulfilling to make it to the finals of the Olympic Games for sure. That had been my goal, was to stand on top of the podium, being one of the best athletes in the world at the Olympic Games. I think the Olympics has kind of lost its appeal to this generation. Really, in my day, like every 4 years the Olympics would come around. Our family would sit down, we'd watch it, we would, just be in awe of the athletes that were reaching that height of that sport, whatever discipline they were in, whether it was boxing or equestrian. I'd never really followed wrestling at that time. It wasn't something that I was like into as a culture. And wrestling becomes a culture. You've done it, and you said you did it through high school. And I don't know where exactly in Washington State, is that where you were at?
Yeah, so I'm in Spokane, and I wrestled at East Valley High School for the coach's name was Craig Hansen,
Okay.
and it was a great experience.
I think the best thing about that sport was I had some really transformational coaches throughout my wrestling career. Even the guys that ran that 6-week program in my junior high were just great men, good guys to be around, quality people. And back then we had men in schools. We had teachers that were men,
Mm.
and these guys were like, "Hey, come out for the wrestling unit. We're gonna do some competition. We're gonna." I mean, it was just like friendly. It was like this is what dudes do, in their rec time. They go fight one another on the mats, and we don't really see that anymore. And we don't see men in schools, teachers anymore. And I think looking back, I'm like, man, that was a blessing. I was around some really positive role models, and then getting into wrestling, you start to see more of those type of men they're here to pour into you and to help you grow as a young man and get you at that next level. And then the deeper you get in the sport, you start to meet other coaches it's about them, or they're transactional coaches. What can you do for me? And that starts to change at the higher
Mm.
levels. It's like more, this is a career. This is not just for fun and enjoyment and competition. This is about, you know, what are you going to do to make me look good as a coach? And those I refer to as transactional coaches. And so my life as a
Wow.
coach, I've always strived to be more transformational in my athletes. And one of the biggest things that I think is really important is to build that relationship with the athletes you're coaching, and vice versa. When I was being coached, it was I had relationships with these guys that I wanted to be around. I wanted to observe their lives, how they lived, the kind of men they were, and follow those examples. And those were the transformational coaches in my life. And when I got into coaching, that was something that I wanted to emulate, be more like that I could transform these men, like see who they can become. I could see that before they could. And I would have to pour that into them and encourage these guys.
Did you ever go to wrestling camps over the summer, like when you were in high school?
No, I did not. Well, I did at my club, just at my own club. We had wrestling camps and we brought in elite athletes from all over the country. So now they call it Fargo, the national championships in the middle of summer,
Mhm.
and back then it was in Cedar Rapids, but it's the same tournament. It was the national championship tournament, and we would bring in elite athletes. So we weren't going out to try to get better for winter wrestling. We were competing in the summers in international styles of freestyle and Greco-Roman. And one of the blessings that
Yeah,
I
I
had was
remember.
go ahead. I'm sorry, Matthew.
We would be going to camps, and the wrestlers who were always they were almost like too good for camp. Like they were always competing at Fargo, or they were trying to win a national championship, and so it didn't really make sense for some athletes to be there because they needed to be competing.
Yeah, and those were the camps I was at. I was at training camps, preparation, and I had a coach that I started my full-time wrestling career in 1985. The coach that was on the '84 Olympic coach, Pavel Kotzen, who just passed away this year, he was our coach. He had finished coaching the Olympic team, moved up to Oregon. He was an immigrant from Russia, and came up and started coaching us. And really kind of put that passion into me that, this is something that I could have success with.
Yeah. So when did you know? Because at 15 years old or 16 years old, you probably didn't know you were going to make it to the Olympics. When did you realize, hey, I'm pretty good at this, and I could go a long ways, and I have Olympic potential?
Man, I don't know if I ever realized that till maybe after college. I had
Mm.
an undefeated season my senior year in college until I got to the NCAA
Mm-hmm.
tournament and I lost the first round of the tournament. Just though I had the wrong periodization training plan. I think I overtrained at the end of the cycle. I was cutting too much weight. There's just a lot of factors that worked into just not having a great performance in that first match. And so I did not feel like I had, fulfilled or accomplished my goals. And so I just wanted to continue on, see how far I could take this sport. And as I started winning national championships and making world teams and competing internationally at the world level, I started to see that I was able to compete with these guys that had been on Olympic teams, represented, their country, whether it was Kazakhstan or Russia or Uzbekistan, somewhere, like that. These guys had been on the podium and I'm beating them. And, at some tournaments and other tournaments, I'm getting beat, but I'm out there and I'm competing. I'm competitive with these guys that are at the top of the ranks. They've already competed in one of the games, or they've medaled at one of the world championships. And I'm seeing that there's some guys that I could compete with. And so it became, a goal for me to make that Olympic team.
And when you finally got there, um, in what was 2000, right?
2000, yeah, was the games I competed in.
'Cause I watched your finals match, your first and second place. Um, is that do you have any regrets? Is that like a match that keeps you up at night, or you know,
No,
um,
no, it's competition. You win some, you lose some. I mean, it's obviously I would have loved to, been the Olympic champion. That would have been
Mhm.
that was my goal, and I fell short.
um, and you were wrestling a guy from Russia, and I wanted to ask you this. I had learned about your when you participated in the Karelin Cup. They said, like, there's a video out there that says the time Alexander Karelin saved Matt Lindland's life,
Hey,
because
hey,
apparently,
Chill Sonnen stuff. I mean, he likes to embellish and tell
yeah.
stories, and I think he might have got some Bert Kreischer stuff involved in that. Some storytelling. Like Chill's a great storyteller. He was a student of mine when he was in high school. I started coaching Chael when he was a sophomore in high school, and worked with him throughout his career. And there was a time he went on up on his own later on. But I had been part of that development process of training him.
Yeah. So did the Russians, did you have a reputation among the Russians in that finals match in the Olympics? Like, did they know who you were, and um did they like you? Like, was there any talk about, like, what happened at the Karelin Cup at the Olympics a few years later?
No, I don't think there was. I don't think that. I mean, of course, the Russians knew who I was because I'd competed against a lot of their top athletes before. That specific tournament you're talking about was an invite only. It was a Russian national tournament that Karelin invited Matt Ghaffari, because Matt Ghaffari was one of the few heavyweights. He was a Olympic silver medalist in Atlanta in the '96 games, and he was one of the few athletes that would actually go out and try to beat Alexander. He would be very competitive. The other guys just kind of resigned to, this guy's going to kick my butt. I don't want to get thrown on my head, so I'm just going to roll over and give him the points. I mean, Alexander was like at that level. 13 years in a row, he never lost a match, whether it was the Olympic Games or the World Championships. It's an unbelievable pedigree that he had. Um, but Matt was one of the guys that would be competitive with him. So he invited Matt over, and Matt said, "Well, listen, you got to bring a couple of my teammates that want to compete as well." And so that was a kind of a deal package, package deal. Bring these guys over, and we developed a lot of great relationships with international athletes. It's amazing when you start traveling the world to see. We think when we're stuck in our own little worlds that everybody's so different. Oh, they must do things completely different in Russia or in anywhere, in Europe and Central Asia. It's like these people are so different. And what you start to realize is that as humans, we're very similar. We all have the same desires and dreams. God created us all the same. And so we start to build more relationships when you start to get to know people and spend more time around them.
That's true. Yeah. I've had the opportunity to travel a little bit, internationally and, spend some time getting to know people in other countries. And you're absolutely right. Like you get to know that, there's people doing the same thing in other countries that you're doing over here that they're just trying to make it. They're trying to find fulfillment. They're trying to, just whatever it may be. And there's that human connection that, your world, we, we kind of feel like we're the center of our own worlds, the center of attention, center of the universe. And um, when you travel outside, you realize, no, it's more than just what we're doing here.
Yeah, no, it's interesting to travel the world, and now, I mean, you can sit in your kitchen table and travel the world through the internet. We didn't have that when I was competing internationally at that time. Late in my career, we got cell phones, but they didn't have the internet on them. They didn't have data where you could connect anywhere you wanted. Um, so it was a mystery what the rest of the world looked like. And now you can kind of get a picture and a vision of what it is, but you don't really get the feel unless you go spend time and experience their cultures and where they live and how they live, and you're a part of that. And there's definitely different traditions and cultural nuances wherever you're traveling, but there's a lot of common themes, and we're social creatures. We like to get together with other people. We like to share a sauna, share a meal, spend time together around those kind of activities.
Yeah. So, just reading your resume and, searching Wikipedia or your website about everything you've done, it seems like you have a lot of ambition to try new things. Because another thing I saw online was that at one point this is on your Wikipedia page, that a 6-time whitewater rafting champion.
In the Pacific
Did you get
Northwest,
into that later?
I dabbled in that as a youth. It was like, yeah, I lived right on the Clackamas River in Clackamas County, and we had some class 2 rapids, and I would go down there almost every day in the summer and just spend time on the water. And but I think that was just more being a child and being a human. Was, I mean, water is life. I mean, it just, to me, getting outside and being in the woods or being on the river is just, it's life-giving. Like the sun, the vitamin D. It's just like I have this longing, this desire to be in God's creation, just be out in His world, and see the beauty that is all around us. And so I love the fact that I was getting on the water. And then later on in life, after a long career in fighting and wrestling, I was approached by a whitewater rafting team, and I didn't really understand the level that these guys were competing at, but they were the top team in the country. They were one of the top 3 teams in the nation. And they asked me if I could help sponsor them, and they could train in my gym and do some of their dry land training in the gym, build some strength, conditioning. And I had time. I had facilities to offer them. And I said, yeah, our class is closed. We've still got, a jiu-jitsu class going on or a kickboxing. You're welcome to use our fitness area. Then I got invited out to do a raft race with them and watch. You want to come out and watch us race? Well, I mean, it's kind of hard. It's not really a spectator sport, to be honest with you, because the rafts are traveling down a river and you got to sit in one location. Maybe you're going to probably pick the biggest rapid and watch some of the carnage and see how guys flip boats and crash and wreck, and that's kind of exciting, but it's not the best spectator sport, to be honest with. Yeah. And I'd never been around whitewater racing at all. The closest thing I'd ever been is I saw the venue at the 96 Olympics on the Ocoee River in just outside of Atlanta. And it was actually in Tennessee, right outside of Atlanta. That was like the biggest experience. I was like, wow, they do some sort of whitewater racing in the Olympic Games. Um, but it's almost a different sport. And so I got invited out there, and they said, "Oh, do you want to jump in the boat and take a ride with the athletes that are competing?" Uh, I'll give it a try. I'm not afraid to jump in and try new things. Well, it was the Wind River. It was a Class 5 run, and I'm taking a ride with these guys. I'm paddling alongside them, and we're scouting the race route. And so we get done with the warm up lap, and I go back and set up and we'll watch the racers, and then we have a celebration at the end of the race. The following weekend, I was invited to go be a part of it on the Upper Klamath. So now we're traveling 5 hours south down to the Klamath River, and I'm competing. I had zero technique, Matthew. I was just trying to use strength and power and my stamina. It ultimately ended up winning the race, but I'd locked up a couple muscles in each side of my neck, referred to as the scalings. It was like these muscles right here. And once I realized, okay, there's technique, I've got to learn, I've got to be coached. And I've always been very coachable as an athlete. So once I learned that and I realized that I actually have developed good core strength throughout my wrestling and MMA career, I've developed knowing how to be an athlete, and I've also knew how to be coachable. So that was the thing that got me into the sport, was like the excitement of something new. And to me, there's a lot of parallels to combat sports, whether it's wrestling or fighting. Even though you're going to compete against the same guy, he's going to bring a different game. He's going to make some adjustments. He's going to try new things because whatever he used last time didn't work, or it worked well and he beat me. And that's the same thing with rivers, is you never put your foot in the same river twice. Like, you never step into the same piece of water twice. The water levels are higher, they're lower, rocks have shifted, they've moved, and they create a lot of hazards. And so it's the variety, it's the unexpected, it's not knowing what's coming ahead. It's that, okay, this is a dangerous, fearful experience. How do I get through it? And how do I perform at my highest level in here? And so whitewater racing for me was became a passion. It might have been something that if I discovered that earlier in life, that might have been more my path that I would have followed, because I absolutely loved whitewater racing. And now as a retired whitewater racer, and I was racing in rubber boats, rafts, with part of a team, and I'd never been a part of a team. I'd been on a wrestling team, but these are all individual athletes going out. You perform, your teammate goes and performs. This is where you have to learn how to work together with one another. And we raced R2, R4, R6. So it was like different. You had 2-man teams, you had 4-man teams, 6-man teams. You had different rivers, different routes. And it's exciting and challenging to compete out there against. You're not just competing against other teammates, though. You're competing against nature as much as you are competing against the other athletes that are out there on the same river with you. So it was an exciting sport, and it's something I still am very passionate about doing. I've not only developed a good rafting race game, but I've also started kayaking. I've started doing stand-up whitewater on paddle boards, and just getting out and experience nature and challenging yourself is part of what I love to do.
Yeah, I've only been whitewater rafting once, and I almost fell out of the boat, actually. And it was, I'd like to do it again, though. When you talk about having to work as a team, or we all fail, or we all, there could be dire physical consequences to us not having unity, to not having some sense of cohesion. But that's amazing. You were able to win a race without any training prior to that, but your body kind of paid the price for it, you said.
I was with the team captain. He was just screaming at me, "Go hard, go hard." And he was picking the
Yeah.
lines and basically steering the boat and just using me for power at that time. And then once I started to learn the sport and get developed in the training, things started changing where I understood where we were going, why we had the boat on this side of the river versus the other side to win the race. I mean, you start understanding how to read water and what the water's going to do up ahead. Like you see a big eddy and you're like, I got to get on the outside or else I'm going to get pushed into that eddy. All the water's moving one direction. So we've got to get on this outside seam of the water. So, I mean, there's just so many dynamics then and variables that change the sport. It's just like wrestling. Like you probably remember like taking like, okay, like in your vision, I'm gonna shoot this single, and all of a sudden you're stuck underneath this guy, and now you're like, wait, that didn't go as planned. Now I got to change my plan, right? And that's kind of with whitewater. It's like,
Yeah.
here's where I want to go, and you hit a big wave or a big rock, and it pushes you offline, and all of a sudden you're nowhere where you wanted to be. You're going backwards through a rapid and over a waterfall, and you're like, okay, that's not how I planned this, but I've got to make an adjustment right now, and I have dire consequences.
Yeah, that sounds so intense. How does you're married, right?
Yes, I've been married to my wife for 33 years. We have 2 kids.
That's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
How would like from your wife's perspective, like having, what is it like being a fighter where, was it stressful for her, and and even in both like wrestling, especially MMA fighting, because the risk for injury is so much greater, but you know a lot of your professions have been really dangerous sports. Like how did she cope with that?
Oh, I think she knows me. I think she knows that
Yeah.
I need this type of activity. Well, and like you said, I love to learn new things, and it's like I'm going to take on a new challenge all the time. I'm not going to, you know, if something scares me, that's something that I know I got to lean into, and I think
Mm.
wrestling like that early on was for me. It was like I did not have a lot of success early on at all. I was very deficient with starting at a late age. I was competing against guys that have been doing this for a decade, and they had the knowledge, they had the skills, and these were things that I needed to develop. And I was challenging myself to get out there and compete with these guys that had, a decade more experience than me. And then the longer you're in the sport, the more experience you get, and now you're able to compete at that level with these guys. And my wife was just there to support me, be there and encourage me, and but it was definitely a tough way to make a living, having a young family, because there's not a lot of money
Yeah.
in Olympic sports, unless maybe track and
Sure.
field. There might be some bigger funding from Nike sponsors or stuff like that, but for wrestling, that was never a sport that was really, you were going to make a lot of money. You were going to compete. You were going to
Yeah.
travel to very rough places and spend time in hard places to live in. And I love that. I love that about the sport, that it took me all over the world.
Mm.
I spent a lot of time in Eastern Europe and Southeast Asia competing against the best athletes in the world. I think the hardest part for her was, the travel, me leaving and being gone, not being there with her and our young children as they were growing up, because I
Mm.
would spend, about 3 months a year traveling, and not in one block. It'd be like 2 weeks over to Uzbekistan, 2 weeks in Azerbaijan, 2 weeks in Turkey, and I'd have a training camp, and then I would have a competition, and then I would come home, and then I would have a lot of time to spend with the family. So it wasn't like a 9 to 5 career. It was like, there's times where you're home and you're all about, spending time with the wife and the children. And then there's times where you don't see them for 3 weeks. So that was probably the hardest thing for her.
Yeah, and especially, I mean, that's in a time when there wasn't FaceTime or anything like that.
There wasn't at all. You had no, you had to get a phone in the lobby of the hotel, and you had to make an international call. And yeah, it was
Mm.
difficult to communicate. Now we
Wow.
got WhatsApp, we can just log on to an internet in any hotel lobby, and you can, talk to people.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Um, Talk to me about how you came to faith in Christ, if you don't mind. Did was growing up as a Christian something, or was that something that came later in life?
Yeah, it came a little later in life, and I think it's always a journey, for sure. And it's a process, just like becoming an athlete. It's a process. I was around, a Christian family, but we didn't go to church. Um, I It wasn't something that was part of our daily lives, but everybody, I think in that era, I think there was more secular faith, I guess, to say like, yeah, we know who God is, we know who Jesus is, we celebrate Easter, we celebrate Christmas, that's the birth, that's the resurrection. Um, but it wasn't something that was a part of our daily lives. My aunt was a bit of a zealot, and she'd actually asked my mom, "Hey, I want to send my boys to so they were my cousins, send my boys to this camp. Would Matthew like to go with us?" And so it was kind of like I went to this church camp, and then it was, "Do you want Jesus? Do you want all that Jesus is going to offer?" kind of thing. And it was like, "Yeah, my hands are up, and I'm part of this." And it was a really great experience. But the problem with after the camp, that there was no discipleship. There was no, okay, let's plug you into a church. Let's get you somebody that can coach you up, that can train you and lead you of what this is that you're pursuing. And what you're pursuing is to know Jesus more and to know. And when you first start reading the Bible and you read it alone, you're like reading the Bible and you're looking at it and you're going, okay, where do I fit in? How is this about me? How does this apply to me? And and then as you mature into that faith, you start to understand this, the Bible has nothing to do with me. It's all about Jesus, and it's all about what he did for us. It has nothing to do with me. Yes, his laws are good. His laws are perfect. And we are not capable, because we're imperfect humans. We're not capable of following those laws. And so we need to repent. We need to come to Jesus. We need to ask him to fill us more with his spirit. And so this is an ongoing process, and especially when you're a young man and you get married early on in life and you're like, man, there's a struggle. What's going on? And I had the Holy Spirit because I had accepted the Lord in my life. And it was like every once in a while I'd get this, okay, we're struggling as a young couple. What do I need to do? Oh, I need to get my wife to church. We need to pursue Christ together. Um, okay, I'm having children. Now what do I do? Oh, I need to look at the scriptures. And so it's just this process of growing in faith and maturing as we're going down this path. And I talked about it earlier. And I've been a Christian since I was 14 years old, but I wasn't always like actively in a church. When my wife and I were young married couple, we got into a church, and it was kind of a big Eva where they were just feeding us milk the whole time. And it was, it was a beautiful, wonderful church, and they knew Jesus, but it was more, it wasn't exactly what I needed. I needed deeper theology. I needed more mentorship in this. And I had the coaching around wrestling, but I'd never had that coaching around my faith. And I think that is something that is really lacking in Christianity, in the church, is that we're getting men out there and we're discipling other men that have come to the Lord, and you're saying, here's what you need to do. Here's how you need to read this Bible. And I tried to figure all that stuff out on my own. And then when you have young kids, you want to raise them in the church. You want them to know the Lord, but you want them to come to the Lord on their own. So both my children are now baptized, and they know the Lord, and they have that relationship. But I just think for me it was like I was a part of USA Wrestling and leading the national team, and I just felt like the Lord was telling me this isn't the place for you anymore. This is not where you
Mm-hmm.
need to be. You need to be back in Portland. And in Portland, we have a drug epidemic, a homeless epidemic. I mean, the city is crashing, and it felt like I needed to get back here, like Nehemiah did in the Bible, and rebuild the city. And the way I want to rebuild the city is I want to train young men in martial arts. I want to get them into the gym. I want them to experience training, learn how strong and powerful they are, and how they can overcome all these obstacles. And I think through martial arts, whether it's wrestling or jujitsu or boxing, these are lessons that I can teach them through martial arts. And so that's really where my passion is right now. I went from leading the Olympic team for the United States to coaching kindergartners through fifth graders. And that's kind of where I'm at. I have all people at my gym. I have kindergartners through guys my age that are still wanting to get on the mats, and you just use this for physical fitness and confidence and learn self-defense. But my passion really is training up these young boys, because as hard to believe as it is that this 8-year-old in a decade, he's going to be a leader, he's going to be a husband, a father, he's going to be running companies, and we need to train these men up in the ways of the Lord.
That you touch on a good point about raising up, and for the last ever since I was I'm 31,
Okay.
but I remember I have vivid memories of adults, and just in the culture that we live in, suppressing a lot of these naturally masculine virtues in young men. And I think what we're seeing today, especially in the post-COVID era, is you're seeing a renaissance happen, and there's a renewed fascination, a rebirthing of masculine virtue. And so things like courage, duty, being a protector, valor, being fatherly, patriotism, strength, courage, and bravery, and just being a truth seeker. I think the wind is sort of in our sails now a little bit, where these are not as suppressed as they used to be, because we have the internet, and there's voices are getting out there, and these virtues we're able to celebrate them now rather than suppress them. And so, like, do you get the same sensation? Do you sort of get that read on the culture a little bit, that things are turning just a
Maybe on the
little
eastern
bit?
side of the states. I mean, you're on the eastern side. It's a little bit more conservative. It's a little more, just like values and stuff. When
Sure.
you get over here on the west side of, Seattle, Portland, you don't see that as much. You don't see that as much. You see that there's a headwind coming against you, so much as there's wind in
Mhm.
your sails. But I do see that there are voices out there that are sharing
Mhm.
that it's important. It's good to be a man. I mean, it's literally good to be a man. There's when we were created,
Yeah.
it was like God said, it's good to be, this is good. This is good. And then when he put
Mhm.
man and woman together, this is very good. And so there is a path, and somebody needs to guide these young men down these paths. They need a guide. They need a coach. They need a father. These are the
Mhm.
metaphors that we use. I run an organization here, a child ministry for children, for young men, and we start them at 5 years old and up to their early 20s, and we want to support them in any way we can. And one of the ways we can is to get them to learn these values and virtues through training martial arts.
Yeah. Yeah, I think in some of those cities where you have, the left has such a grip on those areas. Um, and I hope that, the resurgence you see, just in general, like maybe kind of globally, I really think that you're starting to see some cracks in the wall because people aren't afraid to speak up as much today as they were um, a few years ago, and I think people are growing in their courage a little bit, and so that's amazing that you're instilling those values in kids that are as young as 5 years old, and because those are biblical virtues too, and we need more of it.
We definitely need to guide these young men because they're going to be leading our country. As much as the left is fighting against patriarchy, there is going to be a patriarchy. It is going to exist,
Mm-hmm.
and whether these are good men or awful men are going to lead. That's just the way you can do all the DEI stuff you want. You can push all the women into these roles that they're not suited for, they're not equipped for, and it's never gonna happen because that's just not the way the world was created. We as a people want to change the way that God designed the world, and he's engineered this, he's created this to operate in a certain way, and it is with a patriarchy. And so we need good men to lead this patriarchy.
Yeah, I think that's one area that the word patriarchy even makes the hairs on some people's necks stand up because they get so insulted by it. But I think it's because they have a faulty understanding of what patriarchy even is.
Yeah, it's leading, it's guiding, it's protecting, it's providing. It's all virtuous. Patriarchy is good. It's good to have a father. We know from the research that the children without fathers struggle. They have more drug addictions. They have more incarceration. They don't graduate school as often. I mean, the statistics are shown, but we just got to look at the truth. And so maybe there's more truth seekers going on right now. Maybe the big lie of COVID when everybody was like, be fearful, be afraid, be scared. The Lord does not give us the spirit of fear. He gives us the Holy Spirit. And nothing out of the Holy Spirit is fearful. It's peace, joy. It's not fear. And all throughout the scriptures, it's like, do not fear because the Lord is with you. But you need to follow the Lord. So as you asked me this question earlier about coming to faith, I think the biggest lesson that I've learned throughout my life is that the accepting Jesus and asking him to come into your heart and be with you and give you his spirit is so that you can produce fruit. That, like, if I have the spirit, it should show because of the fruit that I produce. And we need to mentor these young guys up into the Bible isn't about you, it's about Jesus, and it's about what he did for you and how you can follow him because he's the father, he's the coach. This is somebody you need to, I mean, it's all right there when you look at this patriarchy thing that we're talking about. It's God the Father, God the Son. It is patriarchal. And that's how the Lord
Mm-hmm.
created our culture, our society. That's how he created everything. And so if we try to shift that design away, it's not going to work. Just like a car, it's designed a certain way. If you try to recreate it, it's not going to operate like it's supposed to. You're going to have troubles. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
there was a specific design, and this is the way you're supposed to use this design that we've given you. Does that make sense?
It doesn't work, and it also injures other people in the process. Like people suffer as a result of, you know, um, when you go against God's creation.
Yeah, no, people suffer for sure. There's a lot of suffering going on. We see it all around us every day. And then we were completely lied to by these secular leaders that we put in place, that said, okay, this is who we want to lead this country. But all the countries got together and decided that wasn't these leaders calling each other. That was evil spirits talking to each of these leaders together and saying, this is what we're going to do to your people.
Yeah.
It's a little spookier
um,
than you wanted to get into this morning, maybe.
no, that's perfect because the main objective of this podcast is just sort of to challenge or to lean in to what's already happening in the broader culture. Whereas, like, people are waking up. People are waking up, and they're not trusting the traditional institutions that they relied upon before. They're not they're not trusting the government, who was recommending what they should eat, what vaccines they should take, what news they should believe. People are sort of taking this into their own hands, and they're doing their own research. Wherever there's been a spread of ideas take over a community or of a society, you've seen change happen. And so I think people today they have the spread of knowledge, and the internet has really made that possible. But then you also have people are kind of tired of this postmodern wisdom, and it's sort of been dying for like the last couple of years. And so people are kind of going back to the wisdom of the past, I think, because you have even non-Christians who are sort of revisiting these timeless truths about, like, the family and what does a well-structured family look like? Well, there's a mother, there's a father, and they're married, and there's just order when you have that, and they're faithful to each other. And you have people who aren't even Christians coming to this conclusion on their own because of what the culture has fed them the last few years, and they realize it just doesn't work. I don't care how advanced your studies are or what the data says. Like, so people are just waking up, and it's kind of hard to describe it, really, but there is an awakening happening.
And when you say awakening, I mean, I think the left has taken their woke ideology and corrupted it and said, this is what the awakening. It's all gaslighting. It's all like, this is what it means to be awake. And they use the terminology woke. God made us a promise after he flooded the world, and he gave us a rainbow. The left has taken that rainbow and said, this is what it means now. They're changing the design of everything. Just like you were talking about, you get a wife, you have children. Sex is used differently now. It's used online, and it's corruption. It's not the real design. It's this fake design that feels good. It's pleasurable. So that must be right. This must be right because this is pleasure. And it's the left. And when I say the left, I mean, it feels like it's demonic. It feels like it's really spiritual attacks that are saying, this is how we should live. We should get rid of the patriarchy, for one, because this feels good. It's not right that a woman should stay home and raise their children. That's the way God designed the woman, to stay home and raise her children, to nurture those children, while the man goes out and hunts and protects and provides for the family. This is throughout history. This is how it's worked. And the reason that people are waking up to it, because it is the truth. And there's starting to become light shed on truth. And whether they know the Lord or not, they're actually seeking out that knowledge, and that knowledge is the truth.
Yeah. There's a great quote by Jefferson Davis, and obviously I wouldn't agree with everything he believed, but he was a brilliant man, and he said, "Truth, though crushed to earth, is truth still, and like a seed, it will rise again. And I think we're in that rising again moment where it just takes a seed of truth, and you it's like a lion. You won't be able to stop it.
Well, yeah, I mean that sounds like the gospel. It it really does. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it sounds exactly like the gospel. That this is the truth. This is the word. This is the truth,
Yeah.
and it came from the Lord. Very very interesting.
Yeah. It is. We're living in very interesting times. I would like to have a peek 100 years from now to see how people talk about 2020 to 2025. I want to know like what future generations are going to think about it. And so, it's I make it part of my daily life and my motivation to, I know I won't be able to change the world, but G.K. Chesterton has a quote that says, "The greatest political firestorms affect only a fringe of humanity, but ordinary fathers and ordinary mothers literally alter the destinies of nations." And so I think just normal, ordinary fathers and mothers just being faithful and living out these truths, which all truth is God's truth. We need more of it. We need this to spread, and people are waking up. And my hope is that they come to a saving knowledge of, to know Christ. But we still have work to do, like just culturally, to put to death the rest of these really bad ideas that have gripped our culture for the last 50, 60 years.
And I've lived through these last 54 years that you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my son's your age.
Yeah.
He's 31 as well.
Oh, wow.
And he's gotten to see a lot of stuff, but this is definitely could be an awakening time. And I don't think anybody out there thinks Trump is going to save the world and he's a savior,
Sure.
but I think that just him the seeing that he was elected by not just the electoral college but the majority of our population. He won the popular vote, and it was almost the left that was their thing where they're like, well, geez, he did win the vote. They want to get rid of the electoral college because they want this to go on the popular vote, and we know what's going to happen. It's going to be the liberal cities, the big populations of liberal cities that are going to vote in every year who's going to lead our countries. And that's why our leaders and our fathers, our founding fathers, structured that to say, no, let's spread this out. Let's get a consensus of the nation. You know, I mean, you look at our two states alone. If it was an electoral college election, the whole country would have gone red. You look at the number of counties in your state and my state, and the whole eastern side of the state is going to be red. You get these little dots of blue, but that's where all the population is. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
we have to reach the masses, but it is one father, one mother at a time, just raising their families to know the Lord.
Yeah. I think the whole transgender issue, one side, the left, like they really overplayed their hand with that one. Because, I work in a high school, and my generation
Are
was
you a high school
more
teacher?
accepting of,
Are you a high school
yes.
teacher? Oh, bless you. Okay, like I said, there's not enough men teachers. We need more
Yeah,
men in the
we're
schools.
still a minority. There's not a ton of us. Um, but, you do see this shift between the millennials and the Gen Z, where they are sort of peeling away from the trajectory that millennials sort of set up for them. You know, my generation really failed in that way. We drank the Kool-Aid. We drank the whole agenda. But and Gen Z isn't perfect, but they are they're not buying the transgender stuff. At least not all of them. You know, there's a tick in the other direction, and so I think that's encouraging. And like right now, it's interesting that the tides have shifted where it's kind of cool to support Donald Trump. You know, you have pro athletes doing the Trump dance after they score a touchdown or score a goal. And like,
or win in the
had
UFC.
you told me that 5 years ago, yeah, like there, I would have never guessed that it would be cool to support Trump. I thought it was always going to be this uphill battle sort of thing, but like you're seeing a shift
I
happen
don't
right
know if
now.
it's so much as cool as it's counterculture. It's almost punk rock. Even though we did win the popular, we did win the electoral, I still think it's more punk. It's counterculture. It's
Yeah.
I mean, I voted for Ron Paul in '88, the first year I could vote. Uh, because it was the most punk rock thing to do. It was the most counterculture. He didn't want wars.
Mm-hmm.
And I grew up my childhood. It was like we were always in wars. Whether it was cold wars or hot wars, there was always some kind of war going on. And when I heard the message of Ron
Yeah.
Paul and I heard this libertarian and self-governing, early on in my life, it was like, yeah, we need that. And it was punk rock. And now I'm seeing that same thing with now, trad wives and traditional families and marriage and having children and following Jesus. These are the countercultural things that maybe they're not the most popular, but they're the cool. They're what's cool now. And so maybe that's going to change. It's going to be like hip and cool to follow Jesus. I don't know if that's going to be the case, but I pray that it is.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I liken this period to a renaissance because people are going back. People are going back to the wisdom that, came generations before them, just like they did, in the Renaissance period. People went back to classical sources. They went back to classical art, to the original languages, and that's what led to the Protestant Reformation was this branch of the Renaissance where you had the reformers, they were going back to the original languages of the Bible. They were reading the Greek, they were reading the Hebrew, and they weren't relying on translations of the Latin text. They were like, just from the people that came right before them, they were going back all the way to the source. So back to the sources. And I think we're in the very beginning stages of that. And you mentioned Ron Paul and, libertarianism. What do you think of Bitcoin?
Oh, I think it's corrupted. I think the initial idea was revolutionary, but I think it's going to be
Mm-hmm.
corrupted and controlled by governments now.
Yeah. Well, I would, if I'll follow up in an email. I would, I respectfully have a different conviction. Um, but it's something I'm pretty optimistic about actually. Um,
Are,
but
are you
maybe we
pretty
could talk
bullish
more
on the
about that.
Bitcoin yourself?
I am
Very
because
cool.
I've been in it since like 2020 and I've done a lot of reading about it and um, I would classify myself as what they call a Bitcoin maxi.
Okay, I'm not
Um,
familiar with that term, but
and
educate me.
a Bitcoin maxi is a Bitcoin maximalist,
Okay,
where pretty
you want
much
to put all your
you,
all your investments in
yes,
Bitcoin. Is that the only coin you buy,
pretty
or do you buy
much
other coins?
that's the only one I buy. I don't mess around with anything else.
Okay.
And because I like to say this, like Bitcoin is the wheel. You can't reinvent the wheel. You can make small changes to it. You can say that you made an improvement to it, but of its nature, you cannot change it. And it is the purest embodiment of um, sound money. And I think it has a lot of potential to free average people from the corrupt monetary and banking system. And, like, Ron Paul, like, no more wars. Well, the reason they're able to have these wars is because you can keep printing money and you can keep funding it through inflation.
Yep.
We're paying for it because our dollars are worth less, and
It's
they're
just
using
another way to
newly
tax
printed
us.
money to. It is. And but with Bitcoin, it's akin to gold in the sense that you like there's a limited supply of Bitcoin, but it's hard to fund wars and evil things that average people would not want their money to go towards.
Mm-hmm.
And with Bitcoin, it's much like that. Like there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin. You can't make more. And somebody can buy Bitcoin today with as little as $1, and they can buy an asset that will go up in value. And that's never really been possible before. And so,
What
people
about real
trade
estate?
their
What
time and
about real
labor.
estate? Wouldn't that be something that has never gone down in value throughout history? They're
I
never
think
going to
it's
make
I
more
think
of
it's
it.
had its well, they can make more of it now because they'll either just build vertically, they'll build up, or they've built these random islands,
Sure.
in the middle of the ocean. So it's harder to build new land, but it does go up in value. It's the cost to entry is pretty hard for most people.
Yes.
Like it's for somebody who's 28 years old today, with who went to college and maybe is making $60,000-$70,000 a year. It's almost impossible to buy a house.
Yeah, I know. My
It's
my my
almost impossible
son, 31, just bought his first home.
because with Bitcoin, it allows people to participate like in a system that is will help them. Like in the Bitcoin in like space, we use the word fiat currency all the time. Like the fiat is pretty much government money or anything that has value because a superpower says it has value. And we have adopted this mindset that um, things just depreciate in value. Fiat currency goes down, and it incentivizes people to spend their money now because in the future it will be worth less. And that has bled into every other area of life. So people will have casual sex now rather than build a family down the road. People will steal now rather than work hard down the road. And so it's discipled a whole country, a whole world really into
Of
thinking,
consumers.
let me be a consumer now and not delay my gratification. But with Bitcoin and gold, really, these are things that you have to extend your time horizon and watch it grow. And they can't counterfeit it. They can't make more of it. The government can't take it from you. And there's an anonymity factor with it as well because there's a lot of privacy. And so, yeah, I like it that it goes up in value, obviously, but I like it more for the fact that what the tool that it is for humanity. Like I think it's a once in a species type of invention.
Wow. Okay. I mean, I see all the same benefits you see out of that, but I don't know if I was as optimistic as you are. Are you a history teacher? What do you what
No, no,
what do you
I teach high
teach?
school Spanish actually.
High school Spanish. Okay.
Spanish. Yeah, but I do love history. I think there's a lot of lessons we can learn from the past, and um, and I think the Bible really supports that. Like learning from the wisdom of your fathers and having something to pass down. to future generations and just kingdom building, really. And we have to know our history.
Oh, for sure, for sure.
Um,
And I definitely love living in the time I'm living in right now. We're seeing all kinds of, like you were talking about, a renaissance or a revival, and hopefully there's a revival on the near future, and more people are going to come to know the Lord,
yeah.
and because they see the truth and there's more light shed on things. And I think for as many evils that the internet has provided our culture and our society, there's so much light and truth that we can seek out if we go out and do our own research, and we pray about it, we think on these things, we can start to see the actual truth instead of just taking everything that our leaders say at face value and go, okay, that's it, that's the truth. We're going to stand 3 feet apart and we're not going to catch these. We're going to put these ridiculous dehumanizing masks on our face. And people bought into that hook, line, and sinker. I mean, they overplayed their hand, and that's probably why
Hmm.
people are actually waking up, because the hand was overplayed.
Yeah, definitely. And they were miserable for so many years, and then they just came out that there was just they were making things up as they went.
Yeah, it got too much, right? It was like, okay, we can do this for a little while. It wasn't it like 2 weeks to slow the curve, or what the tagline was. It was like, I think
Yeah,
everyone was like, yeah, I could probably deal with this for 2 weeks, sure. And then,
yeah,
6 months later,
yeah,
churches are still closed, and
yep,
strip clubs and weed shops are still open. And it's like they never shut down.
yeah. I was in the military at the time. I was in the Air Force, active duty, and then I transitioned to the National Guard here in Washington during that time. And I refused to get the vaccine, and so it created a lot of obstacles, and it was just a nightmare. You were treated like a second class citizen, um, and I'm glad that's behind us. Like it was it was awful.
But you're still active, or in the
No,
guard.
I'm separated now.
Okay. Did they ask you to leave because
Yeah.
you refused?
Um. Yes, I was given an alternative, like get the vax, or you have to put in for this religious accommodation, and the military moves so slow.
Sure.
Um, I submitted a memorandum requesting a religious accommodation, and a couple months later, I heard back saying it was denied, and then I appealed, and that took another 3 months, and then I had to submit additional paperwork, and that took a few more months, and like by the time that hit, like my date of separation came, and I just got out. I was like, I'm not gonna do this anymore, and
And
it
and
was
and and we lost a lot of good men, that would have served our country well. And
yeah,
the weak men are the
definitely,
ones that stayed in the military. I'm sure there's still some very strong men in there, but it's definitely weakened our military.
yeah, it has, and you have people coming out now. You know, it's no surprise that there are woke generals in the military.
Yeah, we
I've
see it.
seen it. Some of their the talks they give, or their testimonies in front of Congress, or what they're teaching at these military universities, and there's a lot of wokeness for sure. There are a lot of I still believe there are more good than bad, but there's work to do, just like anything else. It's not like this. It's not like the woke virus hasn't affected that in any way. It definitely has.
Certainly. No, I mean, there's a lot of work to
Yeah.
be done everywhere,
Well,
throughout our whole society and our
yeah,
own culture, for sure.
sure. Well, I've really appreciated this conversation, Matt, and just thank you so much for your time. And you mentioned a ministry. What is the name of that ministry that a mixed martial arts ministry that you oversee?
The Father's Heart Combat Sports.
Awesome. The Father's Heart Combat Sports. Just, your life and just everything you've been able to accomplish is really inspiring. And, um, I hope that, God bless you in your ministry, and
Thank you.
may more young men, be inspired by your life. Do you attend MMA fights, like professional ones,
I mean,
any longer?
sometimes, yeah. I have I have
Yeah.
some athletes that are competing now, and so I'm still going. Like this Saturday, coming up, I'm gonna be at a fight tomorrow night. So
Because I noticed, there's a UFC, what, I don't know what number, they're going to be in Seattle in January, and I was thinking about going.
yeah, I mean I've been up to Seattle for UFC before. I took Pastor Mark Driscoll up there for that one time.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, Mark and I went to the
Awesome.
one that was years ago. I also took him to his
Yeah.
first one, which was in Vegas. But when when the UFC came to Seattle, I came up to visit Mark, and we went to UFC together that night too, up in Seattle. So I've experienced those together
Oh,
with
cool.
Pastor Mark, and so
I don't want to take any more of your time. I'm super grateful, Matt,
thank you,
and
Matthew.
um, just thank you for your time, and God bless you, brother,
You're very welcome. We can do it again sometime.
for sure.
All right, brother. Bye.
Bye.